And I do urge you to get your schools involved in that campaign. Conference. It gives me very great pleasure to invite your President, Kim Knappet, to address us.
Madam Vice President, Conference. May you live in interesting times was the way I started my first presidential speech in September. I said, although it's referred to as the Chinese curse, I had, over my 28 years in teaching, seen it more as a blessing, as I like a challenge and I get bored quite easily. However, I think that many of you, like me, are finding these interesting times in educational terms just a bit too much to handle. When we were last in Liverpool, just over a year ago, we were anticipating a less resounding outcome in the general election. I'm sure that you, like me, could not have predicted the whole raft of changes, challenges and pronouncements that would come from the DFE in such a relatively short space of time. From free schools, to failing schools, to coasting schools, to forced academisation. From an academic curriculum to EBAC via new GCSEs and A-levels. From reference tests to rote learning with a side order of skills education and apprenticeships. From teacher qualifications to a new inspection handbook with a comment on banning smartphones thrown in just for good measure. It just never stops. The pace of change met its zenith over the 3 days around the budget. One day, the news that the budget would contain details of forced academisation. The next, a budget statement that removed the need for qualified teacher status, and followed just a day later by the publication of the white paper, Education, Excellence, Everywhere? Or as I've heard it called, simply the wrong priorities. These unrelenting threats stir up a determination in all of us to stand up and be counted as the education professionals we are. We cannot simply let these changes happen to us or to the children and young people in our care. They only have one shot at education. We need to show our profession and our communities that we can speak out, we can present alternatives, and we can stand our ground. We need to join together and harness the outrage that many parents, governors, heads, communities, local authorities and academics, as well as the rest of the education profession, feel about the fragmentation of our state system. We have a chance to share our thoughts on the white paper in the debate a little later this afternoon. And we must, as a thinking education professionals, do this. We cannot change the past, but we can influence the future. Throughout my presidential year, I have been focusing on 3 themes: time, talk, and trust. We need to reclaim our time. We need to stop doing things that have little or no effect on the pupils we teach and start to prioritise our own time, doing tasks that have a tangible impact on our students. Just last year, over 40,000 of us spent hours filling in a workload survey for the current Secretary of State. Some of you will remember it. We told the politicians that teachers were spending too many hours entering data that nobody needs or probably even reads, and that we spend too much time writing detailed lesson plans, not to improve our teaching or the students' learning, but in case someone should drop in and observe us. It is refreshing to see that finally there has been some constructive response, even if it has taken nearly 20 months. As Mary mentioned this morning, I thought we were supposed to show progress every 20 minutes, but obviously that one doesn't apply to the DFE like it does to us. The 3 workload reports have been produced, released on a Saturday. Oh, what a surprise. In the school holidays, another surprise. there is some sensible advice contained in them if you get a chance to read them when you go back to work. But my worry is that the impact of this will be minimal on those in the classroom, on both the staff and our pupils. Because by the time that advice arrives at the chalk face, many more of our colleagues will have already left the profession. The problem is that the reports that were issued last week are only guidance. There is no power behind them, and they rely on senior leadership teams in each institution to fit into their already massive workload time to reflect on their current practice and to streamline it. The result of this, I fear, in many places, will be to leave things be, as it will be too much like hard work to review and reduce them. We have already seen this with the way that the changes to the Ofsted framework have not filtered down into schools. Often the problem lies with implementation. Last year, I was privileged to attend one of ATL's excellent pre-election debates on Ofsted, where we launched our vision for inspection. It was interesting to discover that I was probably the only practicing teacher in the room, and to be able to challenge the statements that were made and to tell them exactly how it is in schools when Ofsted comes, and also, as importantly, when Ofsted is just round the corner and you don't know, how Ofsted impacts the human beings in our schools. The following week, I was to be observed in school. Our school observation policy states that all observations in this school will be carried out under the current Ofsted framework. So, having listened very carefully to Sean Harford, the then Ofsted Director for Schools, at the debate, I went well prepared into my observed lesson. I had no lesson plan. I had no seating plan. I had no data, and I wasn't expecting an individual grade, because that's what the framework said. The problems that ensued in that hour's lesson were not for me or my boys in my class, but for the poor SLT member who had come to observe me. He could not seem to observe me without the documentation. He had a clipboard, and he had a form on it, and he flicked at it, because he didn't know what to do. He then went to the front of the classroom where there was a mound of paperwork, and he rummaged through it. Unfortunately, none of it was mine, because I was just teaching in somebody else's room. Finally, he was really relieved to find a folder with my initials on it, and he said, "Oh, can I have a look at it?" So I said, certainly. What he didn't realise was it was my data folder for the whole of Key Stage 3, which I was responsible for, not for the class that he was observing. When I finally gave him a copy of a bit of a brief lesson plan that I had knocked together, telling him very carefully, you need to be careful with this. This is the only copy, because I don't need a lesson plan like this in order to teach. The relief on his face was tangible. This proves that much of the time we spend, or rather waste, on producing paperwork is not for us or the pupils, but is for those who seek to check up on us. This also extends to the grading. In my feedback session, I was told that he couldn't give me a good for the lesson due to a minor issue that he felt that there might possibly have been with the pace. But he would like to come back and observe me again, as he knew I was a good to outstanding teacher. If he knew that, why did he need to observe me once, let alone twice? More misuse of time, both his and mine, and probably my pupils too. Another area where the lack of time is having such serious consequences is in the area of children and young people's mental health, and we've discussed that this morning. There is now so much pressure on them to achieve, to meet norm-related targets, whatever normal is, We have turned our schools into what our sister union, the NUT, call exam factories. And the pressure to attain has become so severe that we have lost all sense of the curriculum enabling pupils to develop into those creative people, those critical thinkers that we want them to be, and have turned them into widgets who have to learn by rote and learn for the sake of passing the next assessment or test, rather than for any higher purpose. We are constantly being asked to provide, and pupils being expected to attend, additional booster classes, activities, revision sessions, catch-ups, call them what you want. All of these are in addition to classroom-based learning activities. And instead of the enrichment that we should be offering, we're simply offering more of the same, which we actually know is not working. It's amazing, or perhaps not, to read that in schools where they have removed the pressure of these extras on both staff and the students, they are seeing not a decline, but an increase in overall achievement. There is the evidence, but the government just does not want to acknowledge it. You will have seen the evidence of our It's About Time workload campaign showcased around the conference centre and on our website. And many colleagues have signed up to the workload tracker in an attempt to help them identify the pressures on their time and to take control of it. We are empowering them to take control of what really matters, their time. Over the past 7 months, I've been extremely proud to be the president of ATL, the Education Union. As I've mentioned, we are a proactive association, and we are often there for our members with support and advice that they need, because together we face the challenges of working in educational settings in the 21st century. I've been privileged to visit many branches, districts, and to attend other events like the excellent Owning Our Profession conferences that we have organised with the NUT, where I've had the privilege of to both talk and listen to so many of our members. It's often as part of these conversations that we identify the real impact that the many changes and challenges that we face have on you all in your day-to-day lives. I've spoken to a foundation stage teacher who explained how trying to complete the baseline assessments has meant that instead of getting to know the children in her class, she had in fact reduced them to a set of ticked or empty boxes, and that at the end of the first 4 weeks of term, she felt that the children knew more about each other than she did about them. She had wanted to get to know them as human beings, not as a checklist. I've listened to stressed Year 6 teachers who have found the constant changing of the terminology around writing something that they've had to struggle to come to terms with, let alone to communicate to their pupils. When the initial exemplar materials for writing were published, it meant that a Year 6 teacher, following the government advice, would have had to make 34 separate assessments for 6 different types of writing for each pupil. So a teacher with 30 pupils would have had to make 204 separate assessments for each one of them, giving a grand total of 6,120 assessments overall. And that was just for writing. In my written text, I've put 2 exclamation marks at the end of that statement, but I know that I should not have even put one, as the sentence did not start with what or how. But I think a statement like that deserves an exclamation mark or 2, don't you?
Yeah.
Surely someone in the DFE could have done the calculations, or maybe a genuine consultation with teachers would have identified that this was unworkable before the advice was issued, and could have saved a lot of stress and anxiety, not to mention trees, before it was succeeded by further advice. I have sympathised with secondary teachers who still have no idea what the syllabus for their GCSE courses that will be examined in 2018 will look like, All of them will have students starting in Year 10 in September, just 5 months away now. And yet they're still waiting for this crucial information, despite Nick Gibb telling us yesterday that we should have a minimum of an academic year to prepare for curriculum changes. Many of them also have Year 9 students who have already started these courses, and they are struggling to make the best of the extra year and not to waste the time, but are having to guess, a bit of an educated guess, because we're professionals, as to what the students need to study. This has led to disjointed courses and students who, despite their best efforts of their teachers to protect them from the uncertainty, are feeling confused, let down and stressed. And I should know, I live with a Year 9 student. Then I've spent time with our members in the sixth form and FE colleges, where the funding crisis is even more extreme than elsewhere. Members who know that it is essential for there to be a range of courses at different levels available to young people close to where they live. And again, that was said so eloquently by our members this morning. Yesterday. But these providers are currently undergoing these area reviews, which are likely to remove this choice, despite the increasing numbers of 16 to 18-year-olds who will need access to them. I have a son who's thriving on a BTEC level 3, but who would have hated A-levels and whom I'm sure would have dropped out by now had he been forced to do them. What we need to do more is to talk, my second theme, to each other. When I started to teach, we talked, often in those things, do you remember, called staff rooms, over a cup of tea. Now the removal of staff rooms and social spaces, we sit in our classrooms and email the colleague down the corridor or even in the room next door, rather than actually going and talking to one another. Nowadays, many of us struggle on alone because we do not have the time to share our concerns or our successes with each other. We're so busy, we forget that one of the greatest resources in our schools are our colleagues, the ones who have taught that difficult student before, or who have developed that great resource to explain the inner workings of a nuclear power station to the CD borderline group on a Friday afternoon. And I've been there. Why do so many new initiatives fail? Why are so many good teachers leaving the profession? Yes, we know that it is workload that drives so many away. But what is also clear is that something simple, like enough time to talk, to share concepts, to ask for help, to bounce ideas around, is vital. And if the government wants to see standards in education rising, then they need to stop and listen to us and make time for education professionals to talk to each other as well as to them. When we talk about work-life balance, I feel that we've got the emphasis the wrong way round. We are social beings, and many of us work best in teams and together with others. So let's get things into perspective and go for a life-work balance, one where we make time to talk and to listen to each other. We will be so much richer for that. My final theme is trust, and it is one where the government just keeps on getting it wrong. When she spoke to the NASUWT conference last week, Nikki Morgan stated that teaching unions have a choice. Spend the next 4 years doing battle with us and doing down the profession they represent in the process, or stepping up, seizing the opportunities and promise offered by the white paper and helping us to shape the future of the education system. We don't want to do battle. We want to be trusted, to have our opinions listened to have some autonomy in our schools and our classrooms. Why should making our point, suggesting alternatives, be seen as doing down the profession? Surely we would be more likely to be guilty of this if we just let this government ride roughshod over our education system without standing up for what we know is right. Nicky Morgan keeps referring to her desire to hand back control to teachers and school leaders, but her hodgepodge policies and her lack of genuine consultation means that this never happens. If she was to take a step back and to look at the evidence, or lack of it, she would see, as Mary explained this morning, that the academisation programme has simply not worked in raising the standards of students everywhere, which of course is one of her now favourite phrases. She would stop inferring that the improvement in achievement of students, she would stop interfering. I should have written that one in. She would stop inferring that the improvement in achievement of students in London schools through the London Challenge should be repeated in every other area of the country without providing the money that was attached to London Challenge in the first place. It has been amazing over the past few months to watch the teacher recruitment and retention crisis, challenge, sorry Nick, yeah, you said it was a challenge, suddenly dawn on those in government. I was asked back in September what my comment was about this, and I said then, and I say it now, we told you so. We have been watching the statistics for a number of years, those coming into the profession decreasing, those staying only a few years increasing, and now a hemorrhage from every stage of a teaching career. I've been repeatedly asked about the idea of and the value of bursaries to encourage people into teaching. And I'm not sure now where you would place them, because now almost every secondary subject and most primary ITT programmes are undersubscribed. I also look back to the 1980s, and I don't look that old, when I trained, when there were bursaries for some subjects like physics and chemistry, which I did, but the year after I trained. And we still have a deficit in those subjects. So if after 30 years of bursaries they haven't worked, I don't really think they're going to work in the long term now. Where has this blame been placed on for this lack of teachers? Oh yes, on teachers. We are now being told constantly, aren't we? It's our fault that we keep whinging and moaning about the workload, the excessive testing, the accountability, the constant scrutiny, and this is what makes our profession unattractive. Well, Nicky Morgan, you need to listen. You need to be listening carefully, because what we're doing is stating facts, summarising the research and the data that we've collected from our members, which of course is more than your department does when it comes out with rhetoric and unsubstantiated statements. Because when you get in a room with our members, it doesn't take long for the stories from the nursery, the classroom, the laboratory, the playground, the lecture theatre to start to flow. ATL members love the job that they do with the children and young people in their care. And as soon as you break through the wall of frustration, you get to the heart of the matter. We love being part of the learning adventure with our pupils and students. We love those light bulb moments. We love watching a child who has struggled with one concept suddenly get another one really easily and then go off and share their learning with others. We are prepared to put in the effort to support those for which a particular area of the curriculum is difficult, or to direct those who have already got it to go further and deeper. We love education and learning and all that it stands for, but we want our part in it to be as facilitators that support learners on their journey, not as judges who constantly put unachievable obstacles in the way of our children and young people. Whilst writing my speech last week, a friend, an ATL member, popped round She's a foundation stage teacher in a local academy school. The good news she came to share with me was that she had finally been told that she had been granted pay progression to UP3 after the submission of an arch leaver file, which I'm sure broke her back to carry in. And actually they'd admitted that she needed her back pay as it had taken them rather a long time to make the decision. The bad news was that since then she'd been given her mid-year review for her current performance management cycle. Now she's told she's an expensive teacher, so they've had to add some responsibilities and performance management targets and want her to account now for every minute of how she spends her PPA time. What a total lack of trust and a total disregard for the fact that the upper pay spine was implemented to keep good teachers in the classroom. When we were giving our oral evidence to the STRB earlier in the year, we were asked once again about these extra responsibilities or roles for those on the upper pay scale. But back when it was introduced, it was clear that it was for continued substantial and sustained performance and contribution to the school, not for taking on roles which should be undertaken by the senior leadership team or paid for by being given a TLR. And yet I know that my friend will have returned home to prepare resources for the new term, to think about the children and their needs, and to do her best for them alongside trying to complete the extra tasks that she is expected to do. Why? Because she, like all of us, is a professional. She's a teacher, she cares about her class, she is an inspiration to them, and she is an inspiration to me. You see, what is needed is some trust. We need to be trusted as professionals, to be asked our opinions, to be genuinely consulted, and to have our comments taken into account. Constructive conversations can lead to really positive action. You can see this clearly when you read the executive report. There are many collaborations that we have undertaken this year, including the excellent work that we have done on the Better Without Baseline campaign, where we've worked closely with the NUT and about 20 other stakeholders in early years education to challenge the new baseline assessment. It has been a clear and effective campaign, as everyone is saying the same thing. We will consider another of our progressive conversations with our colleagues in the NUT later this afternoon, because our government seeks to manipulate our differences, to create division and to lessen our voice. And it's only as we talk and listen to each other that we can strengthen our influence and make a difference. Winston Churchill said, "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen." My challenge to education professionals is to have the courage to talk. And my challenge to the politicians is to have the courage to listen. You just might learn something. We can't change the past, but we can and must influence the future. We can, every one of us, and we do, every one of us, make a difference in the lives of each other, of the children and young people that we teach, and of our communities. So, conference, let's go and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And if that isn't a rally call, I don't know what is. conference. We shall move to the next item on the agenda. Motion 30.